Way back when I first started planning this rebuild, I decided that I wanted to have the bike running before I disassembled it. That choice has slowed me down a little bit, but it's a good opportunity to shine a light on some issues and deal with them now instead of later. So stick around, let's see if we can get this thing started today, and let's see if the 750's got any secrets it wants to tell us. Welcome back to the garage, everyone. This is episode 7 of the CB750 rebuild. While I am going to touch on all the issues that cropped up in this episode, I'm not going to go into great detail. As usual, I'm going to be including chapters in the description for easier navigation. In this one, I'm going to start going over the bike and I'm going to troubleshoot any problems I find along the way. At the end of all that, we're going to make an attempt to start the bike. Here's a rough breakdown of this episode. The starting controls on the bike are damaged, so we'll start there. The goal is to get the bike turning over with the start button. Next, we'll move on to the ignition system and make sure the bike is getting good spark when it's supposed to. Once I get the major electrical issue sorted, it'll be time to reinstall the carburetor and rig up a temporary fuel supply. So at that point, we should be ready for a test fire. Finally, we'll touch on what's next for the Scout project. First off though, I've changed the oil and I've kicked the bike over manually quite a bit, just to try to get a little bit of fresh oil circulating. Also, I've had to connect the only motorcycle battery I have on hand. Unfortunately, the terminals are reversed. Alright, let's get started. Now that the bike has power, I was able to start tracing circuit. I was able to test the starter by applying power directly to the solenoid. So from there, while consulting the wiring diagram, I moved forward along the bike, testing power along the way, until I found myself at the key switch. I couldn't get any power by turning on the key switch. I decided to remove it so that I could test it properly on the bench. I found it easier just to remove the headlight so that I could get better access to the switch. Once again, consulting the wiring diagram, I tested the continuity through the key switch. But I wasn't getting any, so I decided to try to take it apart so that I could fix it. The contacts weren't in bad shape, but they were pretty dirty, so I decided to clean them up using the Vapour blaster. Once I was getting proper connection through the key switch, I hooked it back up, but I still wasn't getting any power. It turns out that the connector that plugs into the bottom of the key switch was damaged and I hadn't noticed it, and that was preventing me from getting any power. Since I know that the key switch is working, what I'm going to do is hook up a temporary removable jumper so that I can move forward. I was able to find all the parts for the runoff selector and I reassembled everything using a new clip. There's a small micro switch that's inside the clutch lever that's also connected to the starter circuit. We knew that that was damaged as well. It had the wires pulled out. Since I already had the headlight out, it was really easy to just trace the wires back from this damaged switch and install a temporary jumper there as well. Once I verified that the starting circuit was functioning, I wanted to make sure that the runoff selector was disabling power to the ignition system. Since I already know that I have power at the coils, it was time to check for spark on the individual leads running to each spark plug. So I left the old spark plugs in just to see, and I was getting strong spark on cylinders 1 and 4, but nothing at all on cylinders 2 and 3. I tried cleaning the points lightly with a small flat file, but still nothing. I had already ordered a new set of points for the bike, so I swapped out the one that operates cylinders 2 and 3, and I did the condenser too while I was at it. So that was the problem. Now I had strong spark on all 4 cylinders. Then I checked the wiring and the power for the oil pressure switch. So I turned the motor over and had the light verify for me that it was getting pressure. I took this opportunity to set the gap on the valves. Now I was able to do a compression test. Those are the numbers that I got pretty much across the board. So it was looking like a test fire of the bike was going to be possible very soon. So that meant that it was time to get the carburetor ready for install. In a couple of these shots, you can still see the old carburetor boots attached to the engine. Here's a link to a video that I've made that shows you how to recondition old rubber carb boots. Also, if you haven't seen my series on the carburetor rebuild for this bike, at the end of the video, I will give you a link to the CB750 playlist. So once we get the carburetor boots reinstalled, we can get the carburetor back in place and the new cables attached. I'm not going to bother reinstalling the air box at this point. I want the back of the carburetors to be open so that I have direct access to the engine so that I can spray something combustible in there to test fire it. I also don't have a working throttle right now. What I have is a pair of pliers loosely clamped around the cable, not actually on the cable, so that I can actuate it slightly just in case it tries to start. Everything's installed and ready to go. I've got a booster attached to the battery, so it's pretty much time to see if we can breathe a little life into this thing. So now that we have that, let's get the exhaust hooked back up and a temporary fuel supply, and let's see if we can't get this thing started. That's super exciting. We've been waiting for that moment for quite a while. Moving forward, I'm just going to make sure that there isn't anything else that needs to be addressed before the full disassembly of the bike. As I may have mentioned, I'm not ready to do any large modifications to the 750 quite yet. This is my first motorcycle project, so I do want to take my time and do a good job, but I also do want to ride next season. Barring any setbacks, I'll be starting the disassembly right away. As to any upgrades to the safety or reliability of the motorcycle, all things will be considered as long as they don't require any drastic modifications to the bike. The goal for right now is to keep the bike as stock as possible. So thanks as always for hanging out with me today in the garage. If you're new, be sure to check out the CB750 playlist.